I wanted to tell more about history, and my own history parallels really the history of the world. I remember in the early or mid 50s, my mother would be using what they call a scrub board. It was like what they call a ripple board. It was basically two pieces of wood with a metal rippled board, and they would use that to wash clothes. And they would put this board in the sink, and they would put soap on the clothes and run it up and down this ripple board. And that's how they would wash clothes, because people really in those days didn't commonly have washing machines. And you would put the clothes out in a clothesline to dry in the natural air. And eventually what happened was they had these eventually washing machines, and they would have like a wringer on top. You would put the clothes in, and it almost had a bicycle pedal where you would run a shirt or pants or skirt or whatever somebody was washing through this wringer, and it would take most of the water out, and then you would put it on the line. And this was considered very modern because you were already starting to help the clothes to dry even by putting the clothes through the wringer, wringing out the water. So as the water was wrung out, the drying process, as far as the people were concerned about their clothes, was already happening. And eventually people got washers and dryers, and they didn't have to wash clothes in the bathtub, and they didn't have to put clothes out on the line. But that's how it was in the early mid-50s. And I was in Manhattan, and the whole world was different. You had small TVs, and they would be in a huge piece of furniture. And most of the TVs really came in furniture. It was like you opened up this cabinet, and there was this very small black and white screen. And I remember in the apartment building we lived in, only one person had a TV, and that was the girls upstairs, a friend of mine, her family, and people would go up there to watch TV to see Uncle Milton Berle, who was considered at the time to be Mr. TV. And like I said, the cars were old. They were made out of metal, hard metal, and they were solid like a tank. And they weren't the modern cars of today, where they're made out of aluminum and a plastic dashboard and plastic all over the place. And basically the cars, like I said, were built like tanks, but they didn't last very long. 80,000 miles, the car was like shot. So you'd only have a car maybe 2 or 3, 4 years at the most, and you didn't really get any good gas mileage. I remember I had a car that was like 17 miles to the gallon, and I was involved in the gas station business, and I was there during the gas shortages when cars lined up and the gas stations were running out of gas. And you would have open up a gas station, and there would be a mile-long line of cars waiting to get gas. And if you were out of gas, you were afraid to open the gas station because people would become violent. And you had to limit the amount of gas you gave each car, so you were more or less regulated, and at the same time trying to be fair about giving every car a certain portion of gas, and you couldn't fill up one car and not the other. And eventually you'd have to stop the line when you were out of gas, and then people would get very violent about that. I've been waiting in line for 2 hours. How come I can't get gas? Just give me 5 gallons. You try to explain to them you don't have any more gas, and they didn't believe you. They believed that you saved the gasoline for your friends. And I remember in about 1964, 1965, there was a World's Fair in Long Island, New York, and my father was involved in construction, and he was doing the West Virginia Pavilion at the World's Fair. So I was able to get in there kind of before the place really opened, but it was like semi-opened. And I went through all the different pavilions, which, was amazing at the time. The one that struck me the most was the General Electric pavilion, and it was the whole fair was man in our world, but General Electric was like the world of tomorrow. And they took you for a ride. You would get in this like receptacle. It was like going on a railroad track, and it would move you through the different displays. And it would show microwave ovens and fancy cooking machines and self-cleaning ovens and so forth. Because at that point, a lot of people didn't have some of these modern conveniences, and the theme was that life was going to get so good and so modern that people would have a lot of time on their hands, and they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. And this never really happened. Life, if anything, got busier and busier as you hit the computer and the cell phone age. And another thought comes to my mind about, we used to have telephone booths, and I think anybody that was born around the year 2000 wouldn't even know what a telephone booth was. The idea that you went into a booth to make a phone call and you had to put coins in it, like it was a coin-operated machine, in order to make a phone call, and you were restricted to the booth and a little wire with an earphone, would be like unbelievable. It's like, well, why'd you do all of that once you just use your phone? They would have trouble understanding how much technology has changed. If they saw the cars and the phones and phone booths and people with ripple boards washing their clothes in the bathtub and putting their clothes out on clotheslines because they didn't have a dryer. Even in the 50s, we had what they call an ice box. My brother would have to go downstairs when the Iceman came, and he would have these like big prongs, and you'd bring the ice up and you put it in the ice box, and you need a fresh ice every couple of days, because you would also have a melting tray under the ice box, which caught the water that dripped from the ice cubes or the ice block, and that's how you kept your food cold, And most people had ice boxes then in the early mid-50s. They didn't really have refrigerators. I don't know if they weren't developed yet or if they weren't in common use, but I remember even the Iceman. So life was completely different then. The technology, the medicine, the cars. I remember in the 60s and 70s, I was a U-Haul dealer with these gas stations, and we used to hook up trailers to the back of cars, and the old cars had these substantial metal bumpers where you can hook up a trailer hitch, and you'd have a little wiring kit that you would wire the trailer from the car, so the stoplights would show up on the trailer, or the directionals, or the parking lights. And the trailer and the cars of the day would hold the trailer. You'd be able to tow a trailer any place with the temporary bumper hitch. Today they have like, the cars are made out of plastic, and the plastic is like a shroud that just covers the back of the car. It doesn't have any substantial bumper that would be able to tow like a U-Haul trailer or whatever around. The trailers today, with today's cars, would have to hook up with a truck or whatever that had a permanent bumper hitch and a ball to catch the trailer outlet. So this is how life has changed. I mean, you don't see trailers. Years ago, you used to see these U-Haul trailers all over the place on regular family cars. It was a thing that we did all the time, and you don't even see them anymore. And like the phone booth, you wouldn't even think about it, how the cars have changed. And people think that the biggest problem with oil is gasoline, and gasoline's not the big problem, because they can come out with electric cars, they can come out with ways of economizing where you get more miles per gallon and some substitutes like ethanol and so forth. But one of the biggest problems with petroleum is that that's how you make plastic, and everything from the asphalt on the roads to a credit card to a toothbrush to the dash on a car to the plastics all over the car and the plastics that they use all over the place to make tables and chairs and, like I said, credit cards, toothbrushes, dashboards, etc. It's all made out of petroleum. So one of the biggest problems of eliminating petroleum is plastics. And if you look around, you can't even start to name everything that's made out of plastic, from a mailbox to a toilet seat. You know, everything is made out of plastic. And actually, that's refined from petroleum. And people don't realize that it's kind of like something hidden. The problem with eliminating oil and petroleum is not only gasoline. That can be worked out. And even more so than people think with electric cars and whatever. But how do you eliminate plastics in your society?